Northeast. I guess with it being, a focus on ethnic minority students, I wanted to say a little bit about me and also about maybe your motivation for going into postgraduate study and wondering if doing a PhD is for you and if you really feel like you belong, as an academic or doing a PhD. So my parents came over from the Caribbean in the 1960s. My mum came over in 1963. And my dad came over, I think, just before then, actually, in 1961. My parents actually met in the UK. And I asked my mum about it recently, actually, and she said all she really remembers is how cold it was when they got off and how much fog there was in London at the time. I was born in East London, the Royal London Hospital there in Whitechapel, and I went to a Roman Catholic school, which I don't really recommend to anyone, all boys school, but there you have it. And I grew up in East London, and you can see some pictures there of Green Street in East London, and what it's like there in terms of diversity. And, it's quite possible to walk around for an hour and everyone you see is from another country or speaking another language. I really didn't really know what a PhD was. I didn't really have any aspirations to do a PhD. Like a lot of people, after I finished sixth form and then I went off to do a lot of work. I worked in business for a bit. I worked in further education. I did a lot of teaching English, taught English in the UK and also abroad. But I never really had much aspirations for doing a PhD. And I kind of just sort of fell into it, was just looking for something more interesting and meaningful to do, and something where I would have a bit more independence, rather than sort of just working for a business or for an organization where, you kind of don't have as much sort of flexibility and independence to do what you want at times. So I really wasn't sure what to study. I knew I wanted to go to university. I did a flagship course at the Open University, which was in the social sciences. And that was a really interesting course because you got to do a little bit of different subjects. So actually my best subject was economics, but the subject I was most interested in was psychology. And so I decided to do psychology because, as I think Maureen said previously, it's really important that you do something that you're really interested in and that you enjoy. And I went to the University of East London, which is in Stratford. It's the university that I knew because that's where I grew up. And I did really well. I got a really good grade. I got the highest grade in my year. And then I thought, oh, what can I do? Maybe I should stay in academia. And I had a mentor as a professor who actually retired this year, Mark McDermott. And he kind of tapped me on the shoulder and he said, have you thought about doing research? Have you thought about going into academia? And doing a PhD. And I was like, what's a PhD? So he told me about what academics do and what his job was like. And after I graduated, I did a lot of sort of research assistant work. I worked a bit helping the research director with their ref submissions and things like that. So I got to learn a bit about what universities are like. I also did quite a lot of sort of volunteering and just getting involved with things. And I got the opportunity to work on a bit of research looking at Meniere's disease. And so I got a publication, which was, a clinical paper on Meniere's disease, just as working as part of this project. And that was really important because I think without a publication, I probably wouldn't have got a funded place. After my university degree, I then went on to do a master's in research methods at Birkbeck, so that's a little bit different, but that was ESRC accredited, so that was really helpful in terms of getting funding. And then I went and did a PhD at Royal Holloway, University of London, and I did lots of teaching actually as part of my PhD. So again, I think the message really is to get involved with lots of opportunities if you can. One of the reasons why I'm saying all of this is because I think sometimes when you go to universities, particularly if you go to universities like Durham, you look around, there's not a lot of diversity maybe in the student population, or you might look around at your academics and think, is this really for me? Should I really be doing this sort of pathway? And actually, one of the things that I really love about academia, which isn't necessarily obvious, but academics have really varied backgrounds, actually, and really interesting sort of life stories and sort of origin stories, if you were. Um, so you might look at your academics and think, oh, they all look like they're all fairly straightforward middle class academics that probably went to Oxford and Cambridge. But actually, when you actually talk to us, you realize that we have very varied and interesting backgrounds. So don't be put off if you sort of look around and you see, oh, there aren't many black students on my program that I'm interested in. Actually, there is diversity there. Um, yeah, can we next slide, please? So what I mentioned in my talk that I had a mentor who very early on explained to me what a PhD was and how to go about applying for things. Mentors are really, really important. They might be a little bit different than what you're used to, in the sense that mentors in academia and are really, really vital in explaining how things work. So if you're thinking about going into a research career and you're thinking about maybe doing a PhD, getting a mentor as soon as you can, someone who can sort of advise you and say informally about how things work is really a top tip. And it's something that I wish somebody had told me sooner, actually, when I was doing my PhD, how important it is to have actually a couple of different mentors from different backgrounds to sort of filter things and explain to you and translate things and tell you how the institution works and what the sort of things that you should be doing. And actually, this is a normal experience. Everyone goes through it. And I think that information is really, really vital. Now, we do have a mentoring scheme. Unfortunately, it's only for UK home students, or like British students. But, you know, there are maybe other opportunities depending on what institution you're at. So perhaps we could signpost you to different things going on at different institutions. But if you are a UK home student and you're, you know, doing a master's course, or if you've just finished one, or you're thinking about going on to a PhD and you've just finished a course at one of the Northeast universities, get in touch with us. I'll put the QR code there and we'll post it in the chat as well. But really recommend that you take advantage of that if you can. Just a couple of other things that I wish I knew that, you know, one of these things where somebody says, you know, all the things I wish I knew before I started. So one of the things that wasn't really available to me when I was doing my PhD, but it is very common now, is we have YouTube and we have amazing social media. And I've spent quite a bit of time, actually. I don't know why I watch these, but I spend a lot of time on like top tips for PhD students and things I wish somebody had told me before I started my PhD, even though I'm well beyond that. But one of the really fascinating and really useful resources on YouTube is a channel by Dr. Gertrude Montera, who's she's actually in the States, but I've watched at least a dozen of her videos and they're all very relevant for the UK. And she has a lot of things on, you know, the hidden truths and things nobody ever told you or says aloud in academia, and you know, all, you know, 7 things that you need to know and these sorts of things. Very, very useful, very, very honest, very frank. She talks about, you know, race and ethnicity in academia as well as networking and how to actually get ahead. And she also spends a lot of time focusing on what to do if you want to leave academia. Particularly if you have a PhD. So she's really great at pointing out all of those sorts of different job opportunities. So do check that out. It's called The Bold PhD. And if you're interested either to do a PhD or if you just want to know what other opportunities there are beyond that, I highly recommend it. If you can just go to the next slide, please. The Black PhD book. So Maureen has already mentioned this, so I will second the recommendation for it. It's written by some people who are quite well respected in this field. The interesting thing about this book is that it's written as a series of case studies. So you get to read about the lived experience of Black students at different universities doing different sorts of courses, and their reflections and their barriers, their obstacles, and how they overcame it. So it's very useful, I think, for if you're thinking about going into a PhD, it's the sort of thing you should read before you start, I would say. Next slide. And the last thing that I wanted to mention was, our focus is really about encouraging you and getting you to think about careers in academia. But regardless of whatever postgraduate course you do, it's very transferable, and there are lots of really great opportunities out there in the workplace beyond academia as well. So if you do a PhD or you do a master's and you decide actually maybe it's not quite for me, there are lots of other opportunities that you can segue into. You're not sort of stuck in one path for the rest of your life if you decide to change your mind. This is a graphic from LinkedIn. Every year they publish a very short report on the key skills that employers are looking for. And I've highlighted 5 things which I think you will easily be able to demonstrate if you were doing a PhD or a research postgraduate course. So you can see I've highlighted them in red: communication, project management, your ability to analyze data, problem solve, and do research. So you have 50% at least of all of the skills, the top most in-demand skills that employers are looking for in 2024, if you go on and do some sort of postgraduate study. And the top skill, the thing that they were looking for the most, was adaptability. And I think if there's one word, one adjective to describe the skills of a successful PhD candidate, it would be adaptability. So adapting to your new environment, adapting to your supervisor, adapting to the research questions and the research challenges and the data. Adaptability is certainly something which I think you develop as well. So basically, yeah, just I guess be positive and look for the opportunities that are out there, and I think you're more than capable of going on and achieving amazing things. I think that's my last slide.
Thank you so much, Trevor. If you have any questions, also please do post them in the chat. We have now another fantastic colleague who is the lead of development strand here as well, to share, maybe Benjamin, if you're around, share a few words about your career pathway, and yeah, and how are you finding